What's good? What's good? What's good? Thank you guys for tuning in to the Voice of the Fans podcast. This is your man Cam. I got my man. It's been a while. I got my man Kyron Samuels, big dog, the pulling guard. Talk to me. Talk to us about the pulling guard, man. Talk to us about the pulling guard franchise and where the. I know it's taking you a lot of places, but talk to me about what you guys got going on.
So it's been great. It really started after I finished playing. So I played college football and then played pro football for a while. I bounced around some spring leagues and did some NFL workouts, stuff like that, and then ended up getting hurt and had to medically retire. So it was basically like, what's next? I had a couple of degrees, and you have education, right? But sometimes you just want to do something you're passionate about. You want to do something you love, and that's kind of how I ventured into the media space. So started talking about it, started writing for a website, kind of went belly up with that website. So I had to, I felt like I was good enough to do my own thing. So I started my own publication. I started the Substack and LLC'd it, and I'm doing scout and consultant from that as well. I do a lot of film evaluations and breakdown stuff like that because that's where I enjoy it. I'm a former player and coach in that aspect. So it was definitely a little different getting into the media space because you're on the other side of it where the media is kind of quote unquote the enemy, and then you get on that media side of it, you kind of understand the game a little bit more. And also, I just felt like I had a different perspective to add. So mine is much more, my analysis is much more evaluation based as opposed to covering the stories and the people. So I really like to talk about the game and the ins and outs of the game. So that's how I got started. And the pulling guard's doing great. It's helped me, get contracts with Sports Illustrated. So I'm writing with Sports Illustrated now, covering USC, Oregon, and Colorado now. Started covering Colorado this past couple of weeks for the draft. So doing a ton of stuff with draft evaluation there and film evaluation stuff. So I'll have a ton of stuff coming like that. So that's kind of where I am now and kind of how I got started in the media space.
Well, that's super dope, man. Coming from that angle and that perspective, former player, breaking down film, you get to educate the fans on kind of with the game, because just the average fan watching the game on Sunday at the bar, they don't know they can't see some of the stuff you see. So I really appreciate you coming on here. Let the people know where they can find you and they can see your information. Obviously, you said Sports Illustrated, but where can you find you on Twitter, on social media? Let everybody know.
You can find me. I'm on Twitter the most, at Twitter X, whatever you call it, at Kyron Samuels, KYRONSAMUELS, and that's where you find most of my stuff. I post analysis there, jokes, film reviews. I do everything that I would do on my Substack. You just get it for a little bit of that for free, and then my Substack, the Pulling Guard, where all my work, my official work, is there. I do some free stuff there as well. I do some free stuff and also some paid stuff, more in-depth stuff, some breakdowns, podcast reviews, video review, full video reviews, and stuff like that. So that's where you can reach me at. I'm very accessible. I think that's what kind of separates me a little bit from some of the other media people, is how accessible I like to talk to people. Like you said, educate people, and I also feel like I've been educated as well. I thought it was important to say that because as the football brain, you overanalyze sometimes. And a fan who don't know any better, they just say, you know what, it is what it is. And sometimes it is what it is.
It's that simple. Yeah.
I have learned a lot in that aspect as well, because I'll not overthink it, but I'll overanalyze the game. Like, hey, this quarterback was probably looking at this. This is the coverage that he's throwing. It really was just a bad throw. As simple as that. So sometimes the fans actually really win. So I enjoy the back and forth. I enjoy the discourse, and that's where you can find me at. So come talk to me, man. I'm easy to find, easy to talk to.
Well, I love having you here, man. I really appreciate having you here, so we can chop it up. I got a couple bones to pick with you, and we're gonna get through that. We're gonna get through that in our conversation, and then I think I got some wins. I got some wins where you're gonna have to say you were right. You're gonna have to say you were right. We're gonna get through it too, man. But it was a big week in the NFL. So, when I start my show, man, I start my show off playing the numbers game. Okay. All right, and with it being March 12th, 2025, this is week 331 of this iteration of the Voice of the Fans. So we're going to look at the number 12. When you think of the number 12, who wore that jersey number the best, or who comes to your mind first?
So immediately, Tom Brady comes to mind when I think of the jersey number 12. Aaron Rodgers popped up, and then it new aged me. The second name I thought about was Travis Hunter, actually. I started thinking about Travis Hunter when you start talking about 12. But Tom Brady for sure, Travis Hunter, then Aaron Rodgers kind of squeaked in there a little bit when I started thinking about 12.
Okay, that's right. Being up here in the Northwest, we got a shout out to the Seattle, the 12th man. That number 12 has been flying around for a long time up here in the Northwest. So that's one of the not even names, but that's one of the things that come to my mind first when you think of the number 12. But with it being, again, show 331, when you think of the number 31, who come to your mind first, or who were their jersey number the best?
It's crazy. The first name that popped to my head was Jamal Lewis, running back from the Baltimore Ravens, played at Tennessee in college. So that number popped into my head. I'm pretty sure Cromartie wore 31 at cornerback, so that name popped into my head. Those are probably the two names that popped into my head immediately when you say 31.
I think Dave Winfield probably have them both beat, even though your man Jamal Lewis did win the Super Bowl. He did run for 2,000, just like Saquon did, and he won the Super Bowl that same year. So that's a good call as well. So let's jump right into this, man. Myles Garrett gets a contract. First, he said he didn't want to be in Cleveland no more, and then they hit him with make him the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. And then I guess that kind of changes things around a little bit for you, right? He said, hey, Cleveland ain't so bad after all, huh?
Yeah, they gave $40 million per year to stay. I mean, I think that alleviates the winning issue, because the only one thing can solve the not being able to win, and that's being the highest paid quarterback, making $40 million a year, to not have to move, to not have to relocate, learn a new system, go through, and there's no guarantee that wherever he were to land, that they would have won at that place. So you're rolling the dice anyway. If you end up winning in Cleveland, you become a legend even more than you already are. So I understand the decision to forego the possibility of joining the contender for generational. We talk about generational wealth. That's true generational wealth. $40 million per.
Absolutely. So he's in a class of players. He'll next season 10 plus sacks in a season. He's done that more than Jared Allen, DeMarcus Ware, Bruce Smith, Lawrence Taylor. Only two guys who's done it more than him. Do you know who those two guys are?
Let me see. Bruce Smith.
Nope. He's tied with Bruce Smith, Jared Allen, DeMarcus
Ware.
With
Bruce Smith?
Yep. Only two guys have done it more than him.
Strahan?
Reggie White and John Randall.
Wow, John Randall. Reggie White should have been the easy one to get. John Randall would have been tough, but I think, those are great names. When you talk about anytime you're in the same breath as those guys,
just being in that category, being in that same category is pretty incredible. I mean, that tells you the kind of career he's had just up to this point, and he clearly has more in the tank. So Cleveland wanted to lock him up. I'm sure they didn't want to let him get out the door, and so let's go ahead and lock him up. And girls signing big time contracts. Let's give her some credit too. Because she's doing her job on it. Got a shout out to Nicole Lynn for doing her job. The Bills make Josh Allen, give him the highest guarantee ever, and surpassing Garrett's teammate in Deshaun Watson, 250 guaranteed, 330 mil for the contract. How do you feel about Buffalo giving him money? Clearly he was deserving. I thought he was the MVP for most of the season. Even wrote an article about that on the Voice. You can find that on voiceofthefans.com. But do you think they were too early on that? Do you think they could have been a little bit more judicious with their money? You think they could have spread that around with their teammate, like give them some more receivers or give them some more weapons? How do you look at that Josh Allen contract?
I think it's apt. I mean, I think it's right about what it should have been, when it should have been. I think this is the time you pay them. You lock them up now because the contracts are only going to get more ridiculous from here. I mean, you look at the market last season when Tua and Herbert and Lamar and all those guys got paid. People thought those were absurd numbers. And then you look at it now, Tua's like the 11th highest paid. Jalen Hurts is like the 9th highest paid. Lamar's in that 7-something range. The average per year is only going to go up. You look at a quarterback like Dak Prescott is the highest paid quarterback, making $60 million a year. Jared Goff is in the top 3. He's making 50-something. So when you can get these guys especially a quarterback like Josh Allen, I was a Lamar MVP guy. I am a Mahomes over Allen guy. But Josh Allen's don't grow on trees. That is a unicorn in every sense of the word. You have to secure that guy. And I think they've done, in doing so, it kind of frees you up a little bit to make moves elsewhere because you know what you have to work around. You know what the parameters are now. There is no I have to prepare for the likelihood of giving Josh his money or doing this. You know what you have invested in him. Now you build the rest around, and I think they've done a solid job of doing that so far. They went out and got Joey Bosa yesterday. They went out and got some. They went out and got some other guys. They got a couple of other additions that I think are going to be pretty solid for them. And if they are able to hit in the draft, this is going to be a big time for them because they are investing heavily into some of these free agents and retaining their guy Josh Allen. They have to hit in the draft. They have to hit on a receiver because I think that they have a talented core, but they lost Matt Collins to the New England Patriots, and he's not a big name, right? But he was a guy that was very productive for them, especially in the playoffs. You saw him come up. He's a guy that made timely plays.
Big body too, yeah.
So you have to have another guy, or you just have to have a Keon Coleman that you've already drafted step up and live up to his potential. But I think Josh Allen earned his contract, and it was the right time for him to get it.
Let's stay there in Buffalo for a minute because I thought last season when when they got rid of Stephon Diggs, I thought that was addition by subtraction. What we saw with Matthew Stafford once Megatron retired. Matthew Stafford, he couldn't lean on Megatron like he had for those 5-6 years that he played with them. Now he was forced to spread it around, and I thought that was the same case going into last year with Josh Allen. He was forced to spread it around. Now, obviously, Josh Allen brings a different threat than Matthew Stafford. He brings a running threat that is I don't want to say Lamar Jackson-ish, but he's a big running threat. That's part of his game. And being a Dolphin fan, I was hesitant to give Josh Allen the credit that he deserved. And I just kind of through week after week after week, he was proving me that he was deserving of that credit. He was deserving of the MVP that he won. But do you agree with that? Was he addition by subtraction once they let go of Stephon Diggs? And did you see it that way? That now he's forced to kind of spread it around. He's kind of forced to use the other talent on his team, and then obviously James Cook stepped up. Excuse me. But did you see it like that, addition by subtraction, when they got rid of Diggs?
Not necessarily. I thought that losing the talent like that hurts, and you're going to have to adapt. But I think we have to give the offensive coordinator Joe Brady a ton of credit because he kind of took over towards the end of last season before he got the official title, and you saw the offense change then. That was a big reason why Stephon Diggs and the Bills end up parting ways because his role reduced dramatically over those last 6-7 weeks of the season in 2023. So you really got to see what it would look like going forward, and I don't think either one of those guys wanted to be a part of that. So I think it was the right time for them to make the decision to move on. And I think Diggs was probably better off elsewhere. He was having a really good season with C.J. Stroud in Houston before he got hurt. So I think that happened well, and it happened at a good time. But I think the bigger thing is the balance that they found in the offense. I think what you said is true, and it's true to a degree about him having to spread the ball around a lot more. But I think what Joe Brady did that was really great is that he didn't force him to throw the ball 35, 40 times a game like he had been. He didn't have a ton of full field reads, and Josh Allen's capable of doing that. He processes well. He's a smart guy. He has a dumb gene, I like to call it, where he's so talented. He feels like he can make every throw, and that's where he would get into trouble sometimes in the past. Not because he didn't know what he was looking at, it's because he probably thought was thinking he's a little bit more talented than he actually is, and some of these throws are just nobody.
He was just more comfortable. He was more confident than most people.
Right. So I think what they did a great job of this season was simplifying the offense, making it a lot of half-field reads, one-read throws, getting the ball out on time, and finally, like you said, it was important that they leaned on the run game a little bit more, whether that be through Josh Allen or through James Cook. They ran the ball a lot more. They were able to control drives more and drive the ball down the field. So I thought it was a very much balanced offense last season. If you go look at the receiving statistics, everybody got a little bit of some. Tight ends, Kincaid got some. Dawson Knox got some. You look at Shakir had a breakout year. They recently just paid Shakir as well. They gave Shakir a big extension at wide receiver. So you look at those guys, they're able to kind of start to gel together. I think they're going to grow a little bit more in terms of the offense. You get the same guys back. You get another year in the system with Joe Brady, and he can kind of tweak stuff and see where he can get better as a play caller. I think the Bills are going to be a scary team next year. They're already really good, but what they've done defensively to kind of bolster that pass rush, if you can get Joey Bosa and Greg Rousseau playing full season healthy, that's a hell of a pass rush, and they still have the draft to add more talent on both sides.
Yeah. I thought Bosa was an upgrade from my man came over from Denver. Why am I having a break
Vaughn.
for Vaughn? Yeah, I thought he was a upgrade from Vaughn. We'll see how much Bosa has left. In the last couple of years, Bosa has missed a few games each season, so we'll see how much he has left. But that was a good signing on his part. Um, Staying up in the Northwest or Northeast, excuse me, Justin Fields signs a 2-year deal with the Jets. Or do the Jets understand, or now that the Jets have new regime, front office, Aaron Glenn's taking charge of the front office or the head coaching role, excuse me, and he always wanted a mobile quarterback. Is Justin Fields going to be able to survive in that environment? Do you think?
Yeah, I think Justin Fields himself is made for it. I think if you look at where he's been, I don't think any of these places he's going to go in the NFL is more hostile and expect more of a player and a team than what he had to deal with at Ohio State. Even if you go back to Georgia, I mean, you look at what he had to deal with at Georgia. They kind of, I won't say they ran him off, but once he did decide to transfer, that level of scrutiny and ridicule that he faced from that fan base was something crazy. So I think he's made for the environment. When you talk about the environment. I think he'll be fine. I think New York media won't scare him. He's done. It's funny because SEC media, Big Ten media, and those two teams I said specifically, they are as intense and as fervent. They have as fervent a fan bases as anybody. So I think he'll be okay with that. Where I think he's going to have to make a big adjustment is being the leader of a locker room. I don't think he's ever actually been that before. You look at what he was in Chicago. He was a young guy. Everybody liked him, but there was vets there. They had OGs there. They had guys he could lean on. You look at his one season in Pittsburgh. Obviously, that's Mike Tomlin's team. Russell Wilson, he was the leader of the team. You look at Cam Hayward and those guys on their defense. I think his biggest transition, because we know what he is as a player at this point. I don't think you're going to see a drastic shift. He's proven that he can win games. He's proven that he's a hellacious runner of the football and that he can make vertical throws downfield and make some plays happen. The efficiency in between is never going to be great, I believe. But what I think he does have now is some really explosive targets. You have a Garrett Wilson at wide receiver that you can stretch the field vertically. You have a Breece Hall at running back that can help you out, and it's going to be really hard to account for a Justin Fields, Breece Hall read game. Like, pick your poison there. You take away the Fields, you're going to give Breece more options. If you try to take
coming back off in his second year off his injury, he
right.
should be more explosive this year. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Again, a lot of big signings across the league. Devontae Adams go to the Rams this year. I think, and just I don't want to put Devontae in the same category, but as a experienced receiver, I'll call him. I think the Rams will get more out of Devontae Adams than the Ravens will get out of DeAndre Hopkins.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
I think that's a much better pickup, much better fit. Although Devontae's been across the country at a few different stops, do you see him being a more than adequate replacement for Cooper Kupp?
Yeah, I mean, I think Devontae is still really, really good. If you look at what Devontae was able to do last season, the function of the offense, and I think he did have some uncharacteristic drops at times, but I think overall he still found a way to get open. He's such a technical wizard with the route running, with the timing and this tempo. And this is a sneaky thing that nobody ever talks about with receivers, about how they use their hands in hand fighting off the line. People talk about a lot about that with DBs, but it's the same for receiver. Being able to get people off you and use your hands to manipulate movement and those, when you stutter and you break it down like that DB is looking at you. He's trying to figure out what your next move is. You're buying yourself time when you actively use your hands like that. So he's one of the best with that. And I think I say that to say that doesn't go away with age. That technical prowess, that ability, that's always going to be there. So I think as long as he's healthy and he still has some of that quick twitch that gets him off of the line, fine. And I think he does. I think he's going to have a pretty good season. Simply because of the function of the offense. I think he's going to have a great year. And I think D-Hop is going to be solid as well. It's just such a different role. I think that Devontae is coming in.
I'm not sure.
Devontae's coming in to be the guy. He's coming in to be.
Devontae's coming in to be. He's going to be him and Puka. They're elevated. They're going to be a top 4 or 5 receiving core. Obviously, I don't know that the Ravens are going to get. I don't know what the. I don't know. I don't know what the Ravens going to get with Hopkins. Hopkins
you have to adjust a little bit.
Hopkins is long in the tooth, though. If he couldn't show us what he was capable of with Patrick Mahomes, we're going to get a lesson version with Lamar Jackson. I don't think we're going to see anything better than what he was with Patrick Mahomes. Do you?
I think it's just about role. It's kind of like what I was alluding to with Devontae. I think he wasn't asked to come into Kansas City and be the guy. He was asked to come into Kansas City and play a role. And they asked him to. The way they used him was not as a decoy per se, but they used him to leverage other guys because defenses still respect D-Hop. So he commanded a certain level of respect out there when he was playing in edges, and that opened up other areas of the field. And they revamped their offense completely as a whole. Anyway, they went from having they threw the ball a lot quick game, right? But they went overdrive with that this year. They got the ball out more than anybody quick at or behind the line of scrimmage, and the second fastest time behind the Miami Dolphins, who we know their offense is either shoot quick game or throw the ball down the field. So the Chiefs really revamped their offense to tailor it to that because people start putting those safeties back deep and taking away the vertical passing game. So I won't judge Hop too harshly. I do think he's going to be decent. I think he's going to be really good for his role. I think they're going to ask him to be the wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4. You got Zay Flowers, Isaiah Likely, and if Mark Andrews comes back, those are the primary 3 targets. That's just how it's going to be. And if D-Hop is your 4th guy, and he's your guy that you can be able to supplement on third downs and get him in the red zone and get him in one-on-one situations, I think I was talking about this with some of my guys in the group chat, like 600 yards, 6 touchdowns. I think that's the D-Hop range. If you can get that from him next season, that means the offense is in a great spot because if he's getting that, everybody else should be able to get theirs, and it'll be hard to account for everybody.
That's fair. That's a great point. That's a great point, Samuel. That's why we got you on the show, man. That's why I got you on the show because I'm thinking it's going to be that was bad money spent bringing him in. It'll be good for the coaching aspect of coaching up Zay Flowers, showing him how to run some routes. Bateman, I think it would be good for that aspect as well. But when you put it like that, he's going to be behind Andrew, behind Likely. That makes sense. That makes sense. I like that. I like that look. Okay, now here's where you have to give me some praise. Why did the Steelers? Yeah, I know we bantered back and forth on Twitter about Najee Harris. Now the Steelers elected not to re-sign him. Why did you think they elected not to sign him? And do you think he's going to have a rebirth when he gets back to California?
Well, I think they elected not to sign him because one, it's expensive for them for what they're trying to do. They're trying to revamp the entire offense. They're trying to go out and get. It looks like they're heavily in the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes, and if you're heavily in,
that's surprising too, by the way. But keep going.
That is super. It's surprising, especially because I always felt, but it is and it isn't. I'll say it isn't because Mike T loves veteran guys. He loves Russ. He loves those veteran presence. But I think it's surprising because of the cost. And I still think Aaron Rodgers has plenty of good football left in him. I think as long as he's motivated and he's in the right situation, and I think the Pittsburgh is a great situation because the defense is going to be great as long as Mike Tomlin is there. They're going to have good to great defense. But I think the cost that it's going to come at Aaron Rodgers, I'm saying this with no inside information, only based off history, but he's going to command a steep penny, even if it's for 1 year, or even if it's a 2-year deal or 2-year deal with the option after the first. Like, he's going to command some bread. So unless he takes a significant pay cut, that's the surprising thing to me. But I think when I say that, I think that they're trying to clear a little bit of space for a guy like that. We've seen what they just had to pay for DK Metcalf. It looks like, it's like you said, they're cutting costs where they can. They feel comfortable with Jalen Warren. They feel comfortable. They went out and signed Kenneth Gainwell. So you have Gainwell and Warren, which to me it's a little bit redundant, but that's not a terrible thing. If you have two guys with similar skill sets that don't really have too much of a drop off from either, right. I think that's a positive. But I think what worked well with Warren and Najee is that they were two different styles. Najee was getting hit in the backfield and grinding out tough yards, and he was the short yardage guy. And Warren was a change of pace back that can get you some of those yards, catch the ball well out of the backfield as well. So I think that's where they'll struggle a little bit maybe. But I think Najee will have a great year in Los Angeles. I think if you look at historically what Jim Harbaugh offenses are, their run first offense, 60% run. You're gonna get the ball with heavy offensive line sets. You're gonna get personnel, 13 personnel, get a bunch of tight ends in there, and it's going to be better for Najee because I think that offensive line is going to be a lot better in Los Angeles this year. You got Joe Alt and you got Rashawn Slater at tackle. You got two bookend tackles, maybe the best tackle duo in football. You re-signed Bradley Bozeman, who had a rough year last year, but I think he'll be better when the guards get better. And I think if they invest in those guards through the draft or through free agency, what have you, in the next couple of weeks, that's going to be a formidable front at least. And then you look at the Chargers just signed back Mike Williams. So whatever he has left, he's still a vertical threat. So vertical threat with Mike Williams, you have your intermediate short threat with Ladd McConkey. I think the identity of the offense is shaping up well, and he'll have a tough role because he's going to get a lot of carries and he's going to get a lot of tough yardage. But I think it's a role that he'll do well in because it's what he's always done. So as long as he's healthy, he's never missed a game in his career. He's played in all 17 games, even though he's come out of some of those games and been out for the rest of that game. He's played in all 17 games his whole career. So as long as he's on the field, I think he'll hit that 1,000-yard mark again. I think you'll see him get to that 1,200-yard all-purpose that he's reached every season again.
Now, when you say 1,000 yards, now 1,000 yards was good, obviously, when we were playing 12 games this season. 1,000 yards was excellent, was still good when we were playing 14 games this season. Now we're up to 17 games a season.
Right?
Is 1,000 yards what it once was?
Yeah, I think it is because if it was so easy, you would have more people doing it. One. And two, he did it in 16 games all 4 seasons. So if it's the extra game definitely adds a little bit more. It gives you an opportunity. But he did it in 16 games played, I should say, because I think 2023 he got hurt in the first quarter of a game and he came out and he didn't reach it until week 17. But 16 games played. He only played 16 games to reach it each year, and he's had 1,200 all-purpose yards. He's not just a running back that's barely hitting 1,000 yards. He's also a serious threat. In the passing game,
out the backfield, yeah, sure.
What'd you say?
Yeah, catching passes out the backfield. You're right.
Yeah. So I'm going to pull it up real quick because he's not just the guy that helps you out of the backfield. He's one of the leading receivers on the team. If you look at his career, his first year he had 74 catches.
That was impressive. That was impressive. 41
catches the next year. Took a dip. Only had 29 in 2023, but this year he had 36 catches for 283 yards and a 7.9 average. So if your running back is giving you 7.9 yards per reception, that's an added benefit to the game. So I think Najee, what the thing with Najee is you look at it, it's aesthetically unpleasing. I will be the first to admit that. It doesn't look good. It's very ugly. But he averages 4 yards a carry for his career. With the context that he's been hit at or behind the line of scrimmage more than any player in NFL history throughout their first 4 seasons, to me, that's incredibly impressive that you're being put literally in the most difficult position as any running back has ever been put in, being hit at or behind the line of scrimmage.
That's a stat
to average 4 yards a carry and get to 1,000 yards. It's not pretty. He's not as explosive in the open field as Jaylen Warren. So I'll give you that. Once they get to the second level, Jaylen Warren is much better. There's other backs that are more explosive and more dynamic. But in between that 10 to 12 yard range, there's not many better in the NFL than just getting the job done than Najee Harris.
That's the stat you threw at me is getting hit behind the line of scrimmage and then still able to and still be able to pick up that 4 yards per carry. Yeah. I'll give you something. I'll give you some on that one. I just think his overall career average is 3.9.
Right.
I'm not the player I anticipated him being coming out of Alabama. I thought he was going to the perfect team who's still doing 3 yards in the cloud of dust. I thought he was the ideal fit for that team, and he just didn't. He just gave me average. I don't think he gave me anything impressive, and I'm surprised the Chargers signed him. Well, I'm surprised to a point. I know, as you mentioned, Harbaugh wants to run the ball 60% of the time. I get that, and they're rebuilding their offensive line, so they got a lot of young studs on there. Maybe he'll have a rebirth there. That'll be interesting to see. That's definitely something I'll keep my eye on this season. Is what Najee Harris is doing for the Los Angeles Chargers. That's definitely something I'm gonna keep my eye on.
I'll say this before we get out of here. Like, an average back will not be as good as Najee Harris is in terms of statistics production. But I say the difference between a Najee and a Saquon is Saquon turns those plays that should be negative plays into touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs, he turns those negative plays that we talk about getting hit in the backfield or at the line of scrimmage. He'll find a way to score it out of there and score a touchdown. Najee will do that and get you 4 yards. I think that's the difference between good and exceptional. The guys, I think Najee's a very good running back that blocks well and catches the ball well out of backfield. So he probably bumps up to the pretty good running back category. I'm not saying he's elite like those Saquons, Jameers, Bijan, Derrick Henry. Those guys turn those plays in the 60-yard plays, and I think that's the difference between them and Najee, and then Najee to the bad running backs.
And I have to give you some more credit because I did not anticipate, for whatever reason, I did not anticipate Gibbs his burst. I did not expect that to translate to the NFL, and he hasn't lost a step. He still looked like he's playing down there in Tuscaloosa because they open up the hole for him. He's bursting through the holes. He's running around. He's still running the bubble in the NFL. And most times guys run that bubble in the NFL. They hit that sideline pretty quick, and he's getting up the field on that, and that's pretty impressive. I have to give you some credit because you were saying 1-on-1 2 years ago. I'll give you some credit on that one. Good call there.
Yeah, I mean he's nasty because I was kicking my head at Alabama when he was there because I couldn't believe he didn't get the ball more. He would only get the ball 10 times a game. And I understand you had Bryce Young and you had some of those guys, and Bryce Young was going absolutely crazy, but I couldn't believe he wasn't getting the ball more. So a lot of people were shocked that he went so high, and I wasn't, because every time he touched the ball damn near, it's a 10-yard gain. I've never seen so many explosives from a player that didn't get the ball a lot as Jahmyr Gibbs had at Alabama. And you can't teach that elusiveness. So super happy for him because he's about to break the bank this coming up season.
Detroit's gonna, if they know what's good for them, and I think they do, they're gonna do that. What do you think about DK going to Pittsburgh? Is that for the second round pick? Seattle is doing a whole bunch of different stuff that I can't quite understand fully, but sending DK to Pittsburgh for a second round pick, fortunate for them, they got a second round pick. But how do you think? And obviously, this depends on the quarterback they get. For his happiness, if Russell was still there, he'd get the deep ball. Now that if it ends up being Aaron Rodgers, he's going to get every ball. Him and Pickens, if they decide to keep Pickens. What do you think? How that fits for DK Metcalf fits in with the Steelers and what they're doing there?
I think it's, first of all, it's a culture fit. Like what DK wants and what Mike Tomlin likes, and people get at DK because he's super emotional. He's always getting 15-yard penalties for fighting after the whistle, and he's always complaining about something. But Mike Tomlin likes those kind of guys because he thinks he can control them, and for the most part, he does. You never really hear. I mean, you think about the guys that have come through Pittsburgh and what they've been like when they left or before they got there. They never have those issues while they're at Pittsburgh. So, Antonio Browns of the world, and you look at some of the offensive line they had through there, the Pounceys, and all those other guys that they've had to come through there. Nobody really has any issues. I mean, people make fun of George Pickens because he plays funny and he does some crazy stuff on the field, but you never hear about him getting in trouble off the field or being a locker room cancer or anything like that. So I think he respects DK's work ethic. He shows up in shape. He blocks his butt off. He runs hard down. He runs his routes hard vertically. He's going to get you yards after the catch. I think it's a toughness fit. I think that matches. The thing that I have is that you're just doubling down on the skill set, though. I think, he's a better blocker than Pickens. He's probably a little bit more refined in terms of his work ethic than Pickens. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is they give you a lot of the same in terms of skill set when we're talking about actual on-the-field play. So I think they're just doubling down on the skill set. You're going to have two of those guys now, and it's kind of like, pick your poison. And I think the hope is that it opens up some of the middle of the field for the tight ends and the running backs and some of those things. And if that is the way they're going, I think that's smart. Kind of like what the Falcons tried to do when Arthur Smith was there, when they had Julio Jones and Mohamed Sanu, or Julio Jones and Roddy White, some bigger guys.
Great point.
I just, like you said, the quarterback is everything, bro. If you don't have the quarterback that can deliver the ball, it's one thing. I think Russ, it's funny, Russ is obviously his best days are behind him, but I thought he would have fit very well with them in terms of what they want to do. Like you said, the deep ball, he could throw the ball deep to Pickens and DK all game.
Yeah, he was cooking when Pickens was in the game. Him and Pickens seemed to have a natural connection.
Yep. So I thought that Russ would be a good – and I think if Aaron is there, it will look a lot like it did in New York, which is why I can't figure out why he's the guy, because Aaron, to me, is still a very good passer of the ball. He is still a very talented thrower of the football. You look at his numbers from a raw statistic standpoint, he was the top 10 to 12 quarterback in the league.
He had good numbers last year. I think he just had too much control. He was too full of himself.
Yes.
Now he's going to have to come in this place, and he's not the leader. He's just going to be the quarterback. And that'll be a different environment for him.
Yep.
But I was surprised in the fact that Pittsburgh historically has been the best team to draft wide receivers. If you look at the receivers that they have drafted historically, they've had the best wide receivers. So why would you send a number 2 to Seattle for Metcalf and instead of go finding your guy? Because they've been really good at finding their guy. That's kind of surprised me, but I guess you take a known commodity versus a draft pick either way. That's one way to look at it. That was just surprising on my part. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think the thing with DK is that he's 27 years old. He's a proven commodity, like you said. He's a multiple-time Pro Bowler. He has 3 or 4 1,000-yard seasons. The thing with evaluation is that if you would guarantee that your second-round pick would give you that for the next 4 years, you would take that all day. But the likelihood of that happening for you in the second round, getting a receiver of DK's caliber, is not high at all. Especially when you talk about
they got Antonio Brown in the 6th or 5th or 6th round.
100%. But AB is an anomaly. Like
sure,
the Antonio Browns getting Tom Brady in the 6th round. Even the guy I'm not a big fan of this kid, but getting Purdy with Mr. Irrelevant as the last pick of the draft, that's like. You can't. That almost never happens. That's like
you can't bank on it. But I'm just saying, history. If you look at the wide receivers the Steelers have drafted, and we'll just say the last 10 years have been more impressive than most teams' wide receivers. And so, I mean, I understand why you get the known commodity, but if there's one team in the NFL, I'd say go draft me a wide receiver. It'd be the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that's what I'm thinking in that aspect.
I think that. Locking him up long term was smart. I know a lot of people are kind of up in arms about it, how big the contract was, but once T. Higgins gets his deal, and then once Jamar Chase gets his deal, and then once these young guys that are about to re-up in the next year or two get their deal, it'll be like the Tua and Jalen Hurts situation where he'll be in that 12 to 13 range instead of 10 to 15 like people think. So if they got their guy 27 years old and they still have a pick, I still think they can go get a Mecca. To me, you go draft a guy like a Mecca Ibuka in the 1st round at 21 or wherever they had, because then you have Pickens, DK Metcalf outside, and then you have a really good inside guy, slot guy, in Mecca Ibuka, and Pat Freiermuth is still a very good receiving tight end. To me, I don't think that disqualifies them from going to get a guy in the 1st or 2nd round from wide receiver. But I do understand what you're saying. It is an investment, but it seems like they're in win now mode. They're making moves that seems like they want to send Cam Hayward and TJ Watt and all those guys that are playing, Minka Fitzpatrick. They're not going to be able to keep those guys around forever. I think they're at the end of that road. I think the next year or two, we're going to see a couple of those guys hang it up. So I think they're trying to go all in, and I think that's why you might see the Aaron Rodgers push.
Something I've been saying for a long time on the show is Mike Tomlin's he's a good coach. I'm not gonna shit on Mike Tomlin at all. But this record where you haven't had a losing season in the last 9 years. He at the same time, he hasn't won a playoff game in 9 years. So it's about time for them to win some playoff games. So I think they're making that push, as you mentioned right now. The Seahawks, as I mentioned, Seahawks are going crazy. They're doing a bunch of stuff right now. Geno Smith to the Raiders for a 3rd round pick. That's equitable. I think, and then I think they have a swap pick in the 6th or 7th with the Raiders late in the draft. What do you think about Geno to the Raiders? Do you like that move? And then where does that put Seattle? The Seahawks signed Sam Darnold. I don't know that I'm a big fan of that move because we saw Sam Darnold put up. He had a great season with the Minnesota Vikings, but they had the best wide receiver in the game, or arguably one of the best wide receivers in the game. He was playing with a great coach, Kevin O'Connell. He's not going to have that same talent. Addison was a beast for Minnesota. All he's left now with is Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's not a bad receiver. He's a high quality receiver. I get it, but now you take away Lockett and Metcalf. What are you expecting out of Darnold? Darnold is not that guy where he's not the force multiplier. He's not just going to change because he's under center, change the whole fortune of the offense. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I'll start with Geno because I think that's pretty straightforward. It's getting back to his roots, right? He started with Pete in Seattle, and I think that the Raiders are just looking for stability. I do not think this is the long-term option. I think they're going to extend him tonight, tomorrow. You'll see an extension pretty soon, but it'll be for the next 2 or 3 years to bridge a quarterback, and it's why I still think that they'll end up drafting a quarterback this draft, whether it be a Milroe in the second round, they're able to, maybe even a Shadur. If he falls to 6 and they don't take Ginty, which I think they should take Ginty if he's there. But I still think they'll draft and stash a quarterback to learn behind Geno because there's no better guy. But I think the Raiders are longing for stability, and Geno gives you that. He's a top 12 to 14 quarterback in the NFL. He's right in that range. He's been asked to do more. If you know football brains, and you talk to anybody around the league, they'll tell you Geno has been asked to do more with less than anybody in the NFL the last 4 years. And I don't say less because he had plenty good options to throw the football to. But the function of that offense and that offensive line, the difficulty of the throws, the lack of time he had to get the ball off, the processing speed he has to have just to function and keep that offense functional is ridiculous. So for him to be as good as he was, I think he'll be a stabilizing piece. And you look at the offense that they have, Chip Kelly's coming there, so he'll be able to be more creative and give him some easier throws. They have Brock Bowers at receiver. They have Jacoby Myers, who's a plus receiver. He's a solid receiver who'll be able to get open and make something happen. And might be a little exclusive for you here. Word on the street is, Stephon Diggs, they might be in the Stephon Diggs sweepstakes. So let's play a game here, and let's just say they ask Stephon Diggs. You immediately go from an average, teetering offense to Brock Bowers, Stephon Diggs, Jacoby Myers, and then let's say you add a Ginty in the draft. You're able to draft the Ashton Ginty at running back. That offense immediately becomes a lot more desirable. There's still not a great offensive line, but it becomes functional.
You got some weapons now. Yeah, you got some weapons now that they threaten the defense a little bit. You can play some trickery. That's a good point. I've always liked Geno. Well, I like Geno for the Seahawks. I didn't think he was trash. A lot of people like to crap on him. I didn't think he was trash. I thought, as you said, he was doing more with less, and that offensive line was really shaky last year. That make him look worse than his game was. But he was effective. He's a veteran quarterback. Veteran quarterbacks pay. They know the game. He's also paid his dues. So him going back to Pete is comfortable with them. That they get a little bridge. I think Pete is also a bridge coach, but I think Pete, this is kind of a bridge situation. Let's just get stable for the next few years, and we have some stabilization. That makes really good sense, Kyron. Thank you for bringing that up.
Then like Darnold and Seahawks, I kicked the can on this for a while. I'm like, why would they do this? Darnold, to me, played very well last season. He even received a couple MVP votes, which I thought was apt. He got a couple fourth place MVP votes, and I thought that was, respectable because of the year he had. I don't think anybody, it's asking a lot of fans, but and I understand it because of the way the season ended. But the 17 game regular season shouldn't be wiped away because of that playoff game. I understand. Even the week 17 game against the Lions, he didn't play well, but that was more of a team collapse in my opinion. The playoff game was just. That was bad on Darnold.
You have bad games. So, and as good as he was playing, if he just continue to play that as good as he was playing throughout the year, they go to.
He'd still be in Minnesota.
I don't know.
But I think that this isn't a play to win now. They aren't making many moves in free agency. They aren't doing anything but clearing cap space and stashing picks. So I think they extended Darnold because they have to have a quarterback for the next 2 or 3 years. Sure. And he's earned it. He's been good enough. He has familiarity with the offense. Clint Kubiak is going to be up there. It kind of helped him get started. He's a guy that's proven that he's good enough to win games if you can put at pieces around him. But he's not going to be a guy that you're going to have to – well, you're banking on the fact that he won't be a guy that you'll have to extend 3 years from now when the market's going to be really ridiculous. So I think they're
going to get draft somebody. Not to cut you off. I think they're going to draft somebody this year. I think they're going to draft somebody this year.
They have to. I think they have to. I think look at where this contract is worth now. He's 36 per. I think that's like 18 in the 18 to 20 highest pay range. Right. Sounds about right for a guy like Darnold. So they're not really paying over. It sounds like a lot when you hear 3 years, $100 million, but they ain't really paying. That $36 million a year for a quarterback, as crazy as it sounds, is not very much anymore. So he's making below average money, and they'll be able to move on from him for years. So I think this is just a play to load up for the future. They're stashing draft picks and clearing cap space. They're actually some of their insiders were talking about it. It's kind of, the NFL mandates that you have to spend a certain amount of your cap every year, so you don't unfairly stash that money. So it's kind of weird. It's like, where are they going to spend this money at now? Like, because teams are drying up. I mean, the talent is drying up rather quickly. People are making their decisions. Where are they going to spend this money? That's why I'm interested to see, because offensive linemen, the best offensive linemen are already snatched up.
Oh God, yeah.
That defensive linemen are already snatched up. The best quarterbacks are already snatched up. Best receivers outside of T. Higgins are essentially snatched up. I don't really see a ton of money to spend anywhere else. So they're going to have to give somebody a sizable contract or give one of their current players a sizable extension.
A boost, yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see that. But I think they're punting for the next couple of years. I think they just want somebody that can give them average to slightly above average quarterback play and be competitive. And they're setting up for the long term. That's what I feel with Seattle. So that's the Darnold play.
Talk about the Bears and what the Bears are doing. They signed a guard, 2 guards, and a center. I really like what they're doing, as well as the Commanders who went out and traded for Laramie Tunzel. They got Kinlaw from the Niners, and they get Deebo Samuels. I like both of those teams and what they did this season or this offseason. Who had the best offseason between those teams, in your opinion?
Well, if I'm ranking, I think the Bears have had the best so far. I think the Vikings have had the second best, and then the Commanders right after that. But I think the Bears, man, in terms of team need, I don't think anybody fulfilled that better than the Bears have so far. Going out and getting Joe Thuney to play left guard. That is an all-pro, maybe a potential future Hall of Famer. He's protected Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes. He knows the ropes. He's just coming off of an all-pro season. It's not like he's the guy that's on the back end or not playing well. He's coming off of an all-pro season. He's still that guy. Yeah, Jonah Jackson at right guard, who's a former Pro Bowler, who played his best football in Detroit with Ben Johnson. So he's going back to his former coach, former Pro Bowler. You get a talent there. And Drew Dahlman on the inside at center, who's a Pro Bowl talent there. I think they did a fantastic job of solidifying the front, because the tackle position wasn't terrible. I think Darnell Wright is a very good young tackle at right tackle there. So I think they have 4 stamp pieces up there up front right now. I think from left guard to right tackle, solidified. This is where I think they're going to, have to make a choice in the draft. Are they going to rock, with their guy at left tackle and Braxton Jones? I think when he's playing at his best, he is a plus starter in the NFL. He's a guy that is not. I think Taylor Decker's a better player because he's more consistent, but I think you can get some of the same benefits out of him. Or would they draft a left tackle? Maybe a guy in Armand Membu from Missouri. Maybe if Will Campbell from LSU is still there. If Kelvin Banks from Texas is still there. I'm interested to see what they're going to do in the draft, because I think adding a guy like Ashton Jeanty, I keep going back to Jeanty because I'm talking about teams that have everything else figured out pretty much on offense.
Right.
The Bears have the receivers. They have the receivers that are going to be there. They can still add there, but Roma Dunze, DJ Moore at the very least are going to be there. And if you could add a Jeanty there to kind of bolster that running game, I'm telling you, man, I think especially, look at what they did on defense. They went out and added Grady Jarrett, a defensive tackle. I think that is a defense that is going to be a lot better this year, close to what they were in 2023. And that offense, man, if Ben Johnson is who we think he is, the Bears can have a year next year. Amon Ra from the Detroit Lions said it on this podcast. He was kind of starting to get a little concerned because
he said like he was a little nervous. He was a little nervous. He's like, they're in the division and they're making moves.
Yeah, man. And I think that if you look at the way they lost last year, some of them were decisive games, but they lost a lot of close ball games last year. I'll just go back to the 2 Detroit Lion games. Overtime, last play of the game. You look at the Packers game. The first one, they lost on the end of the game kick. The second one, they won at the end of the game. Both Vikings games, down to the wire. You look at the Commanders game that flipped the season for both of those teams. Wasn't a pretty game, but they found a way to take the lead, and only reason they lost because of Hail Mary. They didn't get just dominated all season. They competed with a subpar roster, in my opinion, in clearly subpar coaching, until Thomas Brown and those guys were able to kind of stabilize it a little bit. And that's when you saw Caleb start to improve a little bit towards the back half of the season. But
that's true.
I think they'll be fine. And the Commanders, great job. They did what they need to do, getting Larry Tunsil for Jaden Daniels. They got him another receiver in Debo to kind of get some of the quick game stuff that Cliff loves to do. Still got Terry McLaurin. They missed out on Myles Garrett, but everybody else did too, except for the Browns. So it doesn't hurt him as much as you would think if you went to a Eagles or something. But I love what the Commanders were able to do as well. I still think they need to address the offensive line and the defensive back room going forward, because Marshawn Lattimore did not turn out the way they thought he would, and they burned the pick on Forbes, who's no longer with them. So they have to get that defensive back group fixed. But I love what they were been able to do so far as well.
That was pretty good. What they were able to do just with their offensive line, in the D line. I like Kinlaw a whole lot. That really hurt San Francisco, but I think that helps the Commanders a little bit. As you say, they do need some help on the back end. Answer this question for me. DeAndre Swift has been passed around the league a few different teams. You talking about Genty coming in there if they're able to pick him up, and I understand that might be a little boost. Why hasn't Swift been able to land and stick with his team? He was in Detroit. He was in Detroit first, I believe. Then he was in Philly. Or was he in Philly and then Detroit and then Chicago? What is it about Swift? I can't understand him. I liked him coming out of Georgia. Why hasn't he been able to stick to a team, or is it just about finding the next best thing in terms of a running back?
I think, and this is with everybody involved, him, teams, fans, I think everybody just needs to readjust their perspective. He's just not as good as we thought he was. That doesn't mean he's bad. I still think he's a productive. If he's your number 2 back, you got one of the best. And the guy that's better than him, that's decisively better than him, you'll have one of the better running back duos in the NFL. You look at what he was able to do in Philly behind, an all-world offensive line and a great system with a quarterback that, it has gravity in the run game as well. I think that he was able to do some really good things. But he was never a feature guy. He was never a guy that they were going to be reluctant to let go, which we saw happen. The same thing in Detroit. I think he was good, but he was never a guy that you're going to be reluctant to lose. So I think he's just a number 2. He's a very good number 2 back. If you can find a bell cow behind him, in front of him, that's going to be your 1,300-yard guy, and he's giving you 600, 700, and 8-9 touchdowns a year, that is a fantastic backup. That is a fantastic spell back to have that you can have come in and supplement. But I still think, he's going to find a role in the NFL because he's talented. He's just not a feature guy like we probably thought when he was coming out of Georgia.
And looking at his numbers, and now that you say that, he rushed for 1,000 yards once with Philly in 2023. He was a Pro Bowler that year as well. But he averaged 4.6 yards in Philly. He averaged 4.6 yards as a rookie. And that's where I got really high on him. And then with the Bears, he was 3.8 last year. So you have some – there goes to your point right there. Maybe just not the guy we initially thought he was. And we'll see. We'll see if he gets paired with somebody. And he can be that, thunder lightning type of back. Now, get to your point, your specialty. Before we get to your specialty, I want to know who's the hidden talent in this draft coming up. But before we get there, Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, who has a better career between those two?
Shedeur Sanders to me, I think.
Really?
I'm fond of Cam Ward's ability. I think he's the most gifted quarterback in the class. I truly believe that. I think some of the stuff he's able to do with his arm angles, some of his athleticism and his poise in the pocket, what he's able to do from that perspective. I think he has more ability than any other quarterback. I think his critical errors are more of a detriment at the next level than Shedeur's. I think Shedeur has a much higher floor. I think Shedeur is slightly more accurate. He's more dependable in what you're going to get from him. I think he has a little bit better processing upstairs. I'm not saying Cam can't process. I think Cam is he's capable. But I do think that Shedeur is a little bit better there. And this is the thing with Shedeur. Shedeur's only gotten better every season we saw him. Sure. Jackson State his freshman year, so his sophomore year he made strides. Then from going from FCS against HBCUs to Division I Pac-12 teams, he threw 32 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. I mean, he made a drastic leap there. And then this season in the Big 12, where he was asked to carry even more of a load, he made another drastic jump. He leads as Colorado's all-time leading touchdown passer in 2 seasons. So he made some drastic leaps, and I think
it was Colorado. Come on, let's not get carried away. They haven't had quarterbacks. They had a winning season in 20 years. Man, come on now.
Hey, but they've had some solid quarterbacks. But I understand the point that
But fair point you're making. He's getting better. That doesn't speak to him. That doesn't say he hasn't gotten better. You're right. He has progressed.
Here's the thing: we've never seen Shedeur with an average offensive line. I'm not talking about a good offensive line. We've never even seen him with an average offensive line. And some people talk about some of his bad habits, which are they're irrefutably bad habits. I'm not saying they're not bad habits, but context is important in my opinion. It's not a situation where he was like a guy that I think back to might not ring a bell for some people, but Zach Mettenberger, when he was at LSU, he would just have happy feet. He would bail the pocket. Another guy that does that routinely was Anthony Richardson at Florida. And I like Anthony Richardson's talent, but it's a difference between being flushed from the pocket and not having pocket awareness.
Sure.
I think the first thing is true for Shedeur. He's being flushed from these pockets. It's not a situation where he's just leaving on his own and he doesn't have to. I think that shows up every now and then, but it's not a habit. The habits are trying to do too much, not throwing the ball away, learning that it's better to be in 2nd and 8 instead of 3rd and 14, trying to play hero ball. Right. I do think the issue with that, even from that perspective, is Colorado had no run game. Colorado also had no offensive line. So by default, he was always in hero ball mode, playmaker mode. And the thing is, 80% of the time, it worked out in his favor. He made some great throws. He had some really good receivers. He had a Travis Hunter that he can depend on. He made some very accurate throws on the run. He's tough as nails. People don't give him enough credit for how tough he is. He took a beating for 4 years and never complained, never missed a game. Always got back up and made the plays. So even in the Nebraska game, I thought that was one of his most impressive games during the season because he got pummeled that first half and he threw a bad pick six. One of the worst decisions I've ever seen him make. Then you watch that game, he came back that
second half,
towards the back end of that second quarter, and then the third or fourth quarter, played some really good football, made a lot of throws. They low-key worked their way back into that game. It was a 28-10 game, and they had the opportunity to score to make it an 11-point game with about 9 minutes left. And, college football, we've seen crazier things happen than an 11-point swing in 9 minutes. So I was impressed with how him and Travis worked through that game, and that's just I talk about their football character. So I think Shedeur doesn't get nearly enough credit as he should because of his last name, how braggadocious the Sanders clan is, and everything that you talk about when you talk about the chains and the watches and all this. That's always going to rub some people the wrong way.
It's rubbing a lot of people wrong way because they're talking about him slipping, which is so. That's the only reason he would slip.
So I think a lot of that is just because the Sanders name. I mean, we love it when other guys did it. When Cam Newton was braggadocious, I'm not likening Shedeur to Cam Newton. I think Cam is in a different class. I'm just saying we look at guys like that. We look at Johnny Manziel's of the world, the Baker Mayfields of the world, grabbing his crotch, to the other side. I'm just saying, like, I could point to a history of a bunch of quarterbacks having a quote unquote certain level of arrogance or swagger. I think if Shadeur's name was Shedeur Samuels or Shedeur
Johnson,
Johnson.
It
would be a top 3 quarterback. I think everything else surrounding Shedeur in the storm around him is kind of bringing him down a little bit. But I think what people have to keep in mind is pay very little attention to these reports because there's 32 NFL teams and only one can draft you. So 30 of them can hate you, but if 2 like you, one can trade up for you and get you, or one can say, no, I want to keep this guy. Yeah, not everybody's going to like every guy. Not every analyst is going to agree and have the same perspective. But Shedeur is very much well liked by a lot of NFL teams. I've talked to personnel and scouts myself. Talked to some coaches myself. I've been at the Senior Bowl and been able to talk to some people. Shedeur is well liked. I talked to the East-West Shrine operators themselves where he went to that game and he was supportive for his Colorado teammates. And they said nothing but they spoke nothing but highly of him. They loved him. They said he was a great character guy. Nobody's ever flagged him for stuff off the field in terms of being in trouble. It's all, can you deal with the personality? And I think that's a big difference. So Shedeur and Cam Ward, to me, clearly the crop of this class. I think they're both going to be good in the NFL. Maybe not great players, but I think they're both going to have decent careers.
And it is Lion season until the draft. It is Lion season right now, too. Just a couple more. Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter. I'm not sold on him being a top flight wide receiver. I like him more as a cornerback.
Yeah.
And that he can make some plays on offense. You want to run some offensive plays, have a package for him. I like that better. What's your thoughts on him? And is he going to be a top 5 draft pick?
Travis Hunter is